Hey everyone, welcome back to HD Reddit Reads. Today's topic is what happened at a wedding that made it obvious that the bride and groom shouldn't be married? Are they still together? Let's get into it. My sister-in-law got married last fall, and after the ceremony, they got in an epic fight over the marriage certificate and didn't come to the reception until 2 hours after it started. A week later, they separated for a few weeks while trashing each other on Facebook. They're still together, and now she's pregnant. Edit. I also photographed the wedding, and it was the most stressful professional experience I've ever had. I forgot to mention that the groom and groomsmen dropped a bunch of acid before the ceremony and continued into the reception. He freaked out and had a panic attack and left. They got married after a 10-year relationship. The wedding was painful to watch as they had such a bad fight the night before and they barely spoke to each other all day. Hardly looked at each other. They split up after 8 weeks. The groom drunkenly cornered my roommate and demanded a blowjob as a wedding gift. Apparently, he was under the mistaken impression that all gay men are excited to give pretty much anyone a blowjob at any time. My roommate declined the invitation. Shockingly, that marriage did not last. My good friend was marrying this guy. We'll call him Ned. Ned definitely had a drinking problem that everyone swept under the rug. He promised my friend he would keep it under wraps for the wedding. He made it down the aisle, but by the reception, he was binge drinking. By the end of the night, the groom, Ned, completely disappeared. No one could find him. A few nervous laughs turned to a mild panic when the lights were turned on in an effort to find him. My husband decided to go look for him in the parking lot where he finds Ned on his lips in the dirt. He had smoked a joint and got the spins. My husband tried to talk sense into him, reminding him that this is your wedding, dude. He got Ned to come inside and did the most cringy walk of shame past the bride's family, who was very cross with him. Ned was supposed to drive like 11 miles from the venue to their hotel in the bride's grandfather's vintage Corvette. He was too drunk to drive, so the bride's grandfather drove them, and the bride had to sit in the middle armrest with no seatbelts. Grandpa drops them at the hotel. Bride barely gets groom up to the room, where he passes out on the bed. Bride had to wander the halls looking for someone to help her out of the wedding dress since her groom was passed out drunk. The word annulment was definitely floating around the next morning. As crushed as the bride was, she stuck it out. 3 years later, they are now separating and divorcing because he is still a drunk. We were good friends with a couple who fought all the time. She wanted to get married desperately, and he was indifferent. After years of nagging, he finally proposed. On the day of the wedding, right before he walked out, he looked at us and sighed. Well, maybe she'll stop nagging at me and finally be effing happy. They are now divorced. She cheated on him with a guy she used to date. The bride got drunk at the bar, cut her and everyone else off. The groom was also drunk. People started leaving at midnight, and the bride got mad and yelled about how they were ruining the wedding because she wanted to dance and drink more. I was their designated driver to get them to their hotel. The entire drive there, they fought, she berated him, he cried. That was a long 20-minute drive. I could have scrubbed vomit out with cleaners, but the awkwardness has stained that car forever. They've been together 7 years. The daughter, born 9 months after the wedding, is adorable. During the cake cutting, he smashed cake in her face. She immediately started crying and went to the bathroom for about 30 minutes. Then they got into a huge fight and barely spoke the rest of the night. Shockingly, they are still married, but they still fight all the time. She's my friend from college, so we both keep in touch occasionally. She never has good things to say about him. Bride got drunk, and she started screaming about how she hated her in-laws, who are obviously within earshot. They lasted a few years, had kids, and unfortunately are spending thousands in a nasty divorce right now. My brother's wedding, it was super uncomfortable and awkward during their engagement. My parents kept asking him if he was sure, and he said yes. Then came the wedding. Super small. When they said to kiss, they both went in for a peck, and she turned her face at the last minute, so he kissed her cheek. My husband yelled for them to do it again. I was also their wedding photographer, and he knew I didn't get a good shot. The marriage only got weirder and worse from there. They acted like they were on an awkward first date every day. Finally, a year later, they divorced. Husband disappeared 2 hours into a 6-hour reception because he was bored. Just went into the house and hung out on his phone. It was a chill ranch thing with games and drinking and dancing, adults only. Also, I didn't meet him until the wedding, while me and the bride, hung out pretty frequently. So there was a lead up to that point that didn't help. He wasn't cheating, just watching golf videos. Edit. Also, they lasted less than 2 months. Second edit for clarity. They didn't divorce because of that. Dude 180'd as soon as the ring was on, going golfing every night for hours with different groups of people. She asked him to limit it to a couple times a week. She suggested therapy, he blew her off. She got out and is much happier. The wedding was semi-destination, 6 hours away. His friends drove out there and he ditched them too. The reception was more bonfire-y with free booze and yard games. Stuff both of them had done before with his friends. They bounced right after the obligatory wedding stuff, and we finally got to do fun things. I can try and psychoanalyze what he was thinking, but who knows? Probably some kind of regret. The bride and groom both got coked up and got into some kind of argument over the bride wanting him to help her undo her dress. It ended up with the groom beating the bride beyond recognition and being arrested. He was charged and given a restraining order, and their marriage lasted 1 day. The groom had his car stolen on the morning of the wedding, and he spent the whole day swearing and punching inanimate objects because, as we all heard 1,000 times that day, not only was it the most important thing in his life, it also wasn't insured. The wedding was at a Boy Scout hall, for no apparent reason, and the reception was in the cafeteria at one of those underwater world places with a glass tunnel, but no one was allowed to see the fish because, get this, the whole day had a Lion King theme. Then, towards the end of the night, the bride beat one of the bridesmaids half to death because she was caught effing a groomsman who she tearfully admonished for cheating on her. I have no idea how long the marriage lasted for. I never saw or heard from them again. Not so much evidence that they shouldn't be together, but evidence that my SIL is just a horrible, thoughtless person. The wedding was supposed to start at 3 p.m. At 3, she was getting in a bathtub in her hotel room to unwind before starting to get ready. All of us bridesmaids were already ready. I had to call my mom and tell her that we were at least an hour out. My brother was there waiting already. Oh, and it was October, Halloween, around 40 degrees Fahrenheit and windy, and it was an outdoor wedding in a park with no indoor venue attached. Their poor guests ended up waiting for more than an hour and a half. The divorce papers have been filed and should be final within a few months. A wedding guest looked out of the window, beamed at the groom waiting at the altar, and said, "She's here," and the groom jokingly pretended to run away. It went down like a lead balloon because he had actually run away the previous year, literally went out to the shops and didn't come back for 8 weeks, while she was pregnant with their first child. The bride's mother gave him a look that would have wilted the wedding flowers, and their happy chatter in the room turned to frosty silence, just in time for the entrance of the bride. And they're still together many years later, and have had more children together, but I wouldn't describe them as happily married. Worked as a cook for a 4-year in advance booked wedding spot. I would prep 4 days, work 1 wedding, and have my days off. My weddings were Saturdays. I never see the ceremony, often off-site. If on-site, I was busy. So this one wedding. People complained about the sun reflecting off the water. They booked the time and place themselves, refused all help, but blamed us for not having a sun shield of some sort. Had 100 more people there than planned, and we ran out of food. 40 and 140 are 2 different beasts. Begins to turn to a coke party, 30 seconds after the food. Like, everyone went to their cars and the washrooms. 100 people at once. Bride and groom, their parents. Strung up, the poor DJ got his work in. Bride would come in and grab his wrist, telling him to change songs every 45 seconds. Play this now this. People started whispering a bunch, like, everywhere. There was something up. More coke, more whispers. The security guy comes up and tells me how the new husband is passed out in the car, dead drunk, cars running. New wife is now loose and F someone, behind the garbage cans. The wedding was fake. Bride and groom were quite young and dated happily for several months. Bride was in a hurry to settle down. I think it fit in with our friendship group, who had or were doing the same thing, and pushed for engagement, and the groom was reasonably happy to oblige, but not ready to take the next step, and wanted a long engagement. Bride began pushing to set wedding dates almost immediately. Groom's mother and father were unwell with both physical and mental health issues. Getting closer to the wedding date, groom made it known that he loved the bride, but wasn't ready to settle down yet. Bride wasn't having any of it, and complained to her own immediate family about this, who start harassing the groom's parents about how he's a dog, mistreating their daughter, etc. Groom agrees to go ahead with the wedding if bride's family leave his parents alone. Wife isn't happy with this and called the celebrant to talk some sense into him. Celebrant refused to perform a wedding where one party wasn't on board. Bride insisted the event go ahead, and they pretend it was real. Groom agrees to go ahead with the wedding, and they pretend it was real. But a bunch of guests who had been married or attended weddings recently were all immediately noticing the celebrant didn't say the words legally required for marriage. Edit. In Australia, evidently, this isn't a requirement elsewhere. And no paperwork was signed. Groom's parents refused to attend the reception, leaving table 1 half empty and not paying for the bar service. Guests took back their gifts. Bride and groom avoided each other the entire time except for a super awkward first dance. The whole thing was super surreal and awkward. They split up a couple months later. Thank you for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed the content, please consider subscribing. It'll be greatly appreciated. And if you want to visit the original thread, I'll link it in the description. But yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys in the next one.